So I was somewhat amused when I selected that daily word, and it said some days are for organized accomplishment, and some days are for blessing the mess. I think I bless the mess more often than I get anything accomplished. I don't know why that's such a struggle for me. I'll start to clean out one pile, and then I've got 5, and then the next day I can't find anything. So my system is not working, obviously. Of course, on the other hand, I find more fun things to do. That's part of it as well. So in January of 1977, I was teaching school in Lebanon, Oregon, and 3rd grade. And I was home on this Sunday afternoon, and the phone rang, and it was my mom. And she said, I need to tell you something, that my sister Sheila, at that time she was about 26 years old, and her husband Hank, he was also about 26 years old, and Hank's parents, Floyd and Lucille, and Darren, my nephew, Sheila's son. Darren was 2 at the time, and Sheila was pregnant. So what Mom said was they were all gathered there on the land getting ready to build a new home. And the land was slanted, and Hank was driving one of those big Caterpillar equipment things to clear the land. And as I said, it was on a slant. Well, the Caterpillar tipped, and he was underneath. And Sheila called 911 immediately. They came, but it was too late. So, of course, as I heard those words from my mom, I was absolutely stunned and shocked. I said, Mom, I will come. This was to Drain, about 100 miles south of here. I will come as soon as I can. So I hung up the phone, kind of stunned and in a state of shock, and I thought, okay, the first order of business is to call my principal and let him know. So I did. It was a Sunday afternoon, and he was home. I had explained the situation, and he said, oh, by all means, take that week off. And by the way, have you done your report cards that are to go out this week? So I went over to the school. In those days, report cards consisted of satisfactory, or let's say maybe excellent, satisfactory, unsatisfactory. Well, on those report cards, there were probably 25 of them, everybody got satisfactory with no comments. And I had no feedback. And I thought, hey, this is the way to do report cards. But I didn't tell anybody, and I got them done. So I just chuckle about that in those days. So I immediately then I got my car to drive to Drain, and all of a sudden I thought, I am so spacey and so stunned and so shocked. I better call a friend to take me. And so a friend did take me, as I said, about 100 miles. And of course, nobody slept that night. My grandmother had come from Eugene. We were all gathered there at Mom's house. Sheila kept looking out the window, saying, I know Hank should be coming home soon. No, he won't be coming home. And it was heavy stuff, and especially with a 2-year-old and with my sister being pregnant. So, of course, we went through the motions of planning his service. It was at the Drain Methodist Church. I can remember it to this day. Every seat was taken. Flowers were everywhere. When you grow up in a small community like that, as I did and Sheila did, the community is there for you. In fact, there was a man who came from the plywood where Hank worked. I think it was the next day. There was this man at the door, and I went to the door, and this man said, we're sorry about Hank. We've taken up a collection, and we want Sheila to have this money. And I said, thank you for not just the money, but the thought of support. So I resigned from that job in Lebanon, Oregon. And I really wanted, so the summer, I spent the whole summer, of course, with Sheila. And Dusty was born in May. And so then I resigned from the school system there, as I said. What I really wanted to do was to take the year off from teaching and go over to Monmouth and get my special ed credential, because I had discovered in a classroom of 25 or 30 first graders, you do not get to help those kids who are struggling, and they just need material presented in a different way. So I went over to Monmouth, and I met Bonnie Young. Some of you know who she is. She was teaching a class there. And Bonnie Stabler was teaching a class there. And I got acquainted with them. And, I mean, we're talking 1978 here. And so I went in one time to visit Bonnie Lou in her office. And I said, oh, Bonnie, I just love your class. I think it was on behavior modification, if I remember correctly, but it doesn't matter. And I said, how are you doing? And she said, oh, I just had the most horrible thing happen. I put this box of papers on top of the trash can, and the janitor threw them out. So I said, okay, Bonnie, what can I do to help? Well, all of this stuff needs to be retyped and then run off. And I said, well, I can do that. So I did. And then after I finished that year and got my special ed credential, well, I got a job in Gresham, Oregon. I always thought the grass was greener up north. Maybe they had more money in their school system. I had 2 schools, and my first year identifying kids with learning disabilities. I don't know why, but I sure identified a lot of kids, almost too many. And at the end of the year, one principal was talking with me, and I said, could I be guaranteed just one school next year? No, we can't guarantee that. And I said, okay, I'm going to look. I don't really like to stay a year and leave, but that's what I'm going to do. So I looked around for another job. But before, let's see now, I was in Gresham. That's where I got my next job, as I said. Okay. And so Bonnie Young, when I decided I was going to look for an apartment there in Gresham, she said, oh, I own a house in, I think it was Tigard. And it was a big house. And she said the previous renters had painted the walls all different colors, and there was work to be done on the house, so I could live there. And then Bonnie Young and Bonnie Lou would come on the weekends to work on the house. Okay, that's a good deal. And so sometimes Bonnie Lou's sister, now Georgie was living in Lake Oswego, and sometimes she would have us over for dinner after we'd worked at the house all day. And that's where I met Scott, which was an interesting thing, wasn't it? So like I said, I finished out that year in Gresham, and then I left, and I found out about another job. But before I took the job in Jefferson, though, we're still talking about 1979, 1980, I went to my doctor in Lebanon, Oregon, that I had for many years, and I said, I'm just not feeling very peppy. And I said, this is what's happened with my sister and, everything. So the doctor looked at me and she says, I'll run some tests, which she did, and I got the results, and they were all good. But she said, I have a prescription for you. I would like for you to have some counseling. And I happen to know of a woman who is an excellent counselor. Now, don't be scared of her, even though she's a minister. So I got the name and everything, and I thought, oh, I've never had counseling before. And I thought, I better check this woman out. Well, it happened to be Betty Hours, who was the minister here many years ago. So I walked in that door, and I looked around here in the sanctuary. I didn't see anybody that looked like her. So then I went in the kitchen area there, and here was this woman. She had a cup of coffee, and she was just leaning against the counter there. And I went over to her, and I said, so are you Betty Hours? Yes, I am, she said. Well, I said, my doctor has referred me to you for some counseling. Just call the church office on Monday for an appointment. So I called on Monday. Well, Betty was going to be gone for 2 weeks to Florida, so I'd have to wait 2 weeks. And I thought, okay, well, I can wait 2 weeks. So I got an appointment, and I started my counseling with Betty Hours. And during that time, I went to Unity Village. In those days, you had to go there to take classes to become a licensed Unity teacher. And that was what I wanted to do, where I could teach classes here. People could take them for credit if they wanted to. Of course, that whole program now is you don't even have to go to the village, I don't think, for any of it. It's all online, which is too bad. But I went there several times, became a licensed Unity teacher in 1986. And by this time, after I met Betty and had my counseling, I was doing some volunteering in the office there with Betty. Betty was such a people person. I mean, she could draw in crowds of people, but she didn't always know what was going on because I was helping her in the office, and one day it started snowing up here. And I looked at the window and I thought, oh gosh, there's about an inch or two of snow when we live in West Salem. We need to go. So I knocked on the door where she was counseling, which I'd never done before, and I said, excuse me, but I think we better go. I mean, there's 3 or 4 inches of snow on the ground. Okay. So Betty and I were riding together because she didn't live too far from me. And so we got up over to West Salem while Eola was closed, unless Eola Drive was closed unless you had chains. And I thought, oh gosh, what do we do now? This was so typical of Betty. She said, there's a pizza place there. Let's just go in there and have pizza. Well, how's that going to help us to get home, you know? Okay, Betty, because I couldn't think of any other options. So we went in there, ordered our pizza, and we're eating it. All of a sudden, she looked up and she said, those are my neighbors over there, a table or two away. And so she went over there and she said, are you going home after you finish eating? In other words, do you have a vehicle, to drive in the snow? Yeah. Do you have room for 2 more people? So we did. We got a ride with this couple. Betty didn't know, but they lived in the neighborhood, and it worked out. So during those days, I started helping with Betty. And then, we'll skip ahead here to 1993. And that's when Georgie tried out here. And so she was doing a workshop on Myrtle Fillmore, Mother of Unity, one Saturday. And so, of course, she was here early. I was here early, and I went over to her, and I said, do you remember me? And she said, of course I remember you. You came to my house. We were working on that house at Miller Hill. And I said, oh, good. So then Georgie tried out the next day, which was Sunday here, and she became our minister. Well, I was working in the Salem school district by then, and I started volunteering a little bit more here and enjoyed working with Georgie and with Betty. And I resigned from the school. I took a sabbatical, unpaid sabbatical for the first year. I thought I might want to go back to the school system, took another sabbatical the second year, and I thought, I'm done. And it was so interesting because I told Georgie, I can have both feet now here, and we can do some things together. Oh, yeah. But Georgie had not shared with me that she had discovered that Betty Sword was the office manager, not helping the minister. And she said, I was on a walk the other day, and I said, Spirit, send somebody to assist with me. And it turned out to be me. So we had a lot of fun together and doing retreats and so on. That's all history. So as I told the story about my sister and my counseling and where I was here, as I look back on that story, everything was like a point of light. And there was divine order. There's always divine order, but then sometimes divine order seems way out in the ethers, especially if it's not the kind of order we want. So I was, one of my very favorite Unity authors is Eric Butterworth. And he calls it, let's see, I need to get my glasses and I need to get my book. Here we go. So he has a chapter in here called The Divine Law of Adjustment. The student of life forever asks the question, why? When changes, delays, losses, or accidents occur, he wonders, why did this happen to me? The old religion, unable to find reasonable answers, rationalize that it must have been God's way to test or to strengthen you or to prepare you for something better. Question why has two basic and very different answers. One has to do with the why of retrospect, and the other has to do with the why of forecast. Why did this happen? Here we are faced with the law of cause and effect. Nothing just happens. There's always a cause. There can be no limiting causes in the mind of God. The important thing is that whatever happens, life goes on. Life is for living, for unfolding, for growing. Something happened. What can be done about it? This does not imply that God arranges difficulties for our good. The will of the infinite for you is changeless and eternal. It seeks ever and only to establish that which is good in your life. Even if you mistakenly engage in experiences in the darkness of fear, the divine law of adjustment is with you to lead you through the darkness into the light of new blessings. The problem may have been a great crisis, even a tragedy, in which you went to the very brink of disaster. Yet because of the ceaseless activity of God in you, not only could you find help and strength when you needed it, but you went on to new growth and greater blessings. And that's basically what I had to do when my brother-in-law died suddenly. I had to go on. I wore myself out in the process, and that's led me to counseling, which led me here. Could have led me somewhere else. You know, I could have found a different counselor. But evidently it wasn't meant to be, because I found a counselor here and stayed here, and I'm still here. So what he says, he's Eric Butterworth, God's law of adjustment regulates all the affairs of my life, and all things are in divine order. God's law of adjustment. Can you say that? God's law of adjustment regulates all the affairs of my life. Regulates all the affairs of my life. And all things are in divine order. All things are in divine order. So I'm going to close today with a poem. I mentioned that Betty Sword was working in the office with Georgie and I, and she was the office manager for many years. We were kind of like a three-legged stool, and Betty would get so upset with Georgie and I because we'd come up with an idea, and Betty'd go, oh no, I don't think that's going to work. What are you girls doing? You're planning another retreat, you know, and she really gave us a run for our money. But she wrote this poem for me, and that was when I had been here for 25 years. I have been here for now an additional 19, so that would be 44. But I'm going to read it just the way she wrote it. 25 years are just a blip in the universe's grand scheme. But here they mark a time Diane used to gather up her dreams. Teacher, nurturer of children's minds that filled her days and nights. No plan for her to soul stretch until she found this place, Unity of Salem Church. Shy and quiet country girl, the back row was her place for a long time. The lessons, new to her, were learned, and she kept them in a space that she called new fields as yet unturned. Courageously, opening her heart to Spirit's singing voice. The back row was too far removed, and now the front row was her choice. 25 years is not so long to burst from the cocoon. Through joy and tears, the butterfly now dances around the room. I will treasure this forever because it speaks of how I went from the back row to the front row and how I did one thing and then I was doing it with another thing. And it was points of light, you know. And sometimes the points of light can be a little dim if we're going down a pathway we don't like. I wasn't too happy to come here and do counseling, but I knew in my heart I needed to. Otherwise, I'd wear myself out and not be able to help my sister anymore. So let's prepare now for our meditation time. So I invite you to get comfortable in your chair. Perhaps something I've said today has triggered something within you, or your story could be similar to mine. And so I would like for us to imagine those points of light that are always guiding us. And I have said before, show me, Spirit, the next point of light. And so I just imagine a road filled with these little candle lights. And I can go in this direction, I can go in another direction, and yet everything is in divine order. Divine adjustment, as Eric Butterworth said. And sometimes we have to adjust our sails to get in the flow. Because there are times we might go down a different road. That's okay. Might be a little detour. But then, not too long, we'll be back on the main road. And we keep on keeping on. So, sweet Spirit, we give thanks for all those times in our life in which we're growing and maturing and being led. Unity has changed my life in so many ways. And if you stay open and receptive, you might find yourself in a talent show or something, not planning on it, but somehow that road opened. That point of light got lit. And away we go. And the thing about it is, here at Unity of Salem, we support one another in those times that we struggle, that we don't understand what's happening. And come, I will walk with you, be with you. And some of you I've known for many years, and some of you I haven't, but that makes no difference. We're all here in the school of life. And we give thanks ahead of time for those lessons as we stay open and receptive, reminding ourselves every day that there is a way. There is a way. And somehow the challenges don't seem so heavy then. We give thanks for being here at Unity of Salem. All the many ministers we've met, people we've met along the way. And with gratitude in our hearts, gratitude in our bodies, we begin to feel our feet on the floor, begin to feel the chair in which we're sitting, and then very gently opening our eyes and returning to this place. Amen.